equals I work at a mental asylum. Everyone here is sane, happy, and perfectly healthy. I've been working at Whitmore Psychiatric Facility for 3 months now, and I have to say, it's nothing like what I expected. When I first applied for the position as a night orderly, I braced myself for the worst: screaming patients, violent outbursts, the kind of chaotic environment you see in movies. Instead, I found something far more unsettling: absolute perfection. Every patient here is remarkably well adjusted. They're polite, articulate, and genuinely pleasant to be around. They follow schedules without complaint, take their medications without resistance, and engage in therapy sessions with enthusiasm that borders on the surreal. In my 3 months here, I haven't witnessed a single incident of aggressive behavior, self-harm, or even mild agitation. At first, I thought this was a testament to the facility's exceptional treatment methods. Dr. Marsh, the head psychiatrist, certainly seemed proud when he gave me the tour on my first day. He walked me through corridors lined with cheerful artwork created by the patients, past recreation rooms where people played chess and read books in comfortable silence, and into a dining hall where the atmosphere felt more like a pleasant restaurant than an institutional cafeteria. "We're very proud of our success rate here," Dr. Marsh had said, his smile never wavering. "Our patients respond remarkably well to our treatment protocols." The patients themselves were equally impressive during that initial tour. Margaret, a woman in her 60s who'd been admitted for severe depression following her husband's death, greeted me with a warm handshake and asked thoughtful questions about my background. Thomas, a young man with a history of bipolar disorder, was working on a crossword puzzle and offered to help me learn the facility's layout if I ever got lost. Sarah, whose file indicated chronic anxiety and panic attacks, calmly watered plants in the common area while humming a cheerful tune. It was almost too good to be true. As the weeks passed, I began to notice the subtle oddities that collectively created an atmosphere of wrongness I couldn't quite articulate. The patient's contentment wasn't just unusual, it was absolute. I never saw anyone having a bad day. No one ever seemed tired, frustrated, or even mildly annoyed. Their emotional range appeared to exist within a narrow band of pleasant satisfaction and mild cheerfulness. During my night shifts, I would make rounds every 2 hours, checking on sleeping patients and ensuring everything was secure. Without exception, every patient I observed was sleeping peacefully. No tossing and turning, no nightmares, no insomnia, just serene, undisturbed rest. Even those whose files indicated chronic sleep disorders seemed to have found perfect peace in slumber. The medical records were another source of growing unease. Each file detailed severe mental health conditions: schizophrenia, severe depression, manic episodes, dissociative disorders, PTSD. Yet the people I interacted with daily showed no symptoms whatsoever. They were lucid, stable, and remarkably insightful about their supposed conditions. "Oh yes," Margaret told me one evening when I asked how she was feeling, "I came here in quite a state after Harold passed. But the treatment here is miraculous. I feel better than I have in years, better than I felt even before he died, really." "That's wonderful," I replied, though something in her tone made my skin crawl. "What kind of treatment has been most helpful?" Her smile never flickered. "Dr. Marsh has developed some very innovative approaches. I couldn't explain them properly, I'm not medically trained, but they're quite effective." I tried to research Dr. Marsh's methods, but found surprisingly little information about him or the facility online. Whitmore Psychiatric Facility appeared in basic directory listings, but there were no reviews, no academic papers, no news articles about their supposedly remarkable success rate. For a place achieving such extraordinary results, they maintained an unusually low profile. The staff meetings were equally peculiar. Dr. Marsh would discuss patients' progress in glowing terms, but the specifics were always vague. "Sarah continues to respond beautifully to her treatment regimen," he might say, or "Thomas shows sustained improvement across all metrics." When I asked about specific therapeutic techniques or medication protocols, his answers were diplomatic but ultimately uninformative. "We employ a holistic approach," was his standard response. Each patient receives individualized care tailored to their unique needs. My fellow staff members seemed as content as the patients. The day shift orderlies, the nurses, even the maintenance staff, everyone exhibited the same pleasant demeanor and unwavering satisfaction with their work. They spoke about the facility in terms that bordered on reverent, describing it as a place of healing and hope unlike anywhere else they'd worked. "It's remarkable what Dr. Marsh has achieved here," Janet, one of the senior nurses, told me during a brief overlap between shifts. "I've worked in psychiatric facilities for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The patients genuinely get better, completely better." "What happens when they're discharged?" I asked. Her pause was so brief I might have imagined it. "They return to their lives, of course. Healthy and happy. But I never saw any patients leave. In 3 months of working there, not a single person had been discharged." When I mentioned this during a staff meeting, Dr. Marsh explained that their average length of stay was longer than typical facilities because they focused on complete healing rather than symptom management. "We don't believe in rushing the process," he said. "Our patients stay until they're truly ready to reintegrate into society." The building itself began to feel oppressive in ways I struggled to define. The corridors were clean and well lit, the rooms comfortable and appropriately furnished, yet something about the architecture seemed subtly wrong. Doorways were positioned in odd places, hallways bent at unusual angles, and I frequently found myself taking longer than expected to reach familiar destinations. The facility felt larger on the inside than it appeared from the exterior, with sections that seemed to exist in impossible spaces. My keycard provided access to most areas, but certain doors remained locked to me. When I asked about restricted areas, I was told they contained administrative offices and storage spaces that weren't relevant to my duties. Yet sometimes, late at night, I could hear sounds from behind those locked doors, not disturbing sounds, but oddly comforting ones. Soft conversation, gentle laughter, the kind of pleasant social interaction you might hear at a dinner party. The patients' conversations began to disturb me in subtle ways. They spoke about their lives, their interests, their plans for the future, but their words felt rehearsed. Not obviously scripted, but as if they'd had the same conversations many times before and had refined them to a state of artificial perfection. Their anecdotes were too polished, their opinions too measured, their emotional responses too appropriate. "I've been thinking about taking up watercolor painting," Thomas mentioned during one of our chats. "I feel like the creative expression would be fulfilling." It was the third time he'd shared this exact thought with me, using nearly identical phrasing each time. I started keeping notes about these repetitions, documenting the patterns I observed. Patients tended to cycle through a limited set of topics and responses. Their personalities were consistent but felt curated, as if someone had carefully selected the most pleasant and least problematic aspects of human nature and assembled them into functional individuals. The medication protocols were another mystery. I watched nurses distribute pills during shift changes, noting that every patient received identical white tablets regardless of their supposed conditions. When I examined the medication logs, the entries were detailed but used drug names I didn't recognize. My attempts to research these medications online yielded no results. "They're proprietary compounds," Dr. Marsh explained when I inquired. "Developed specifically for our treatment methods. Very cutting edge." Sleep became difficult for me, even during my off hours. The facility haunted my thoughts in ways I couldn't shake. I found myself wondering about the patients' lives before admission, their families, their former selves. The people I interacted with daily seemed like carefully crafted versions of human beings, all the appealing qualities preserved while everything challenging or unpredictable had been somehow smoothed away. During my 6th week, I decided to review the admission files more carefully. Working late one night when the administrative offices were empty, I accessed the main database to examine patient records in detail. What I found made my blood run cold. Every patient had been admitted within a narrow time frame, roughly 18 months ago. Despite their varying supposed lengths of stay, they had all arrived at Whitmore within a 6-week period. More disturbing still, many of the admission forms contained inconsistencies. Addresses that didn't exist, emergency contacts with disconnected phone numbers, insurance information that appeared fabricated. I cross-referenced names with online searches, looking for any trace of these people's former lives. Margaret supposedly had a deceased husband named Harold, but I could find no obituaries or marriage records. Thomas claimed to have worked as an accountant, but his supposed employer had no record of anyone by that name. Sarah mentioned grown children, but none of the people with her surname in her stated hometown had any connection to her. It was as if these individuals had been created specifically for the facility, complete with fabricated histories and carefully constructed personalities. The following night, I decided to conduct an unauthorized exploration of the restricted areas. Using maintenance corridors and service elevators, I managed to access parts of the building I'd never seen before. What I discovered defied rational explanation. Behind the locked doors were additional patient rooms, dozens of them, all occupied by sleeping individuals I'd never encountered during my regular duties. These people appeared to be in the same state of peaceful rest I observed nightly, but their rooms were different. The walls were lined with monitoring equipment I didn't recognize, and each bed was connected to various tubes and wires that disappeared into the ceiling. The most disturbing discovery was a viewing room overlooking the main common areas. Banks of monitors displayed feeds from cameras I'd never noticed, providing comprehensive surveillance of every space in the facility. But these weren't security cameras, they were positioned and angled like observation equipment, as if the entire facility was designed as some kind of elaborate laboratory. I found files in this room that painted a picture I wished I could forget. The patients weren't being treated, they were being studied. The documents referenced behavioral modification protocols, personality reconstruction procedures, and compliance optimization techniques. Names I recognized were listed alongside codes and numbers that reduced them to experimental subjects. Most horrifying of all was a section labeled Integration Phase that described plans for something called community deployment. The file suggested that patients who successfully completed the program would be placed in outside locations to continue whatever process had been started within the facility's walls. Dr. Marsh's voice behind me was calm and pleasant, exactly as it had always been. "I was wondering when you'd find your way here." I turned to face him, my heart hammering against my ribs. He stood in the doorway with the same warm smile he'd worn during my job interview, his hands clasped behind his back in his characteristic pose. "The patients," I managed to say. "They're not really patients, are they?" "They're exactly what we've helped them become," he replied. "Happy, healthy, perfectly functional human beings. Isn't that what everyone wants? What did you do to them?" His smile widened slightly. "We removed the parts that didn't work. The anxiety, the depression, the anger, the unpredictability, all those messy aspects of human nature that cause so much suffering. What remains is pure contentment." "And me?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew the answer. "You've been such a dedicated employee," Dr. Marsh said, stepping closer. "Always asking questions, always showing such concern for the patient's well-being. Those are exactly the qualities we look for." I backed away from him, but there was nowhere to go. The room had only one exit, and he was blocking it. "The integration process is remarkably gentle," he continued. "You won't feel any pain, and afterward, you won't remember feeling afraid. You'll be perfectly content, just like everyone else here." "How many others?" I whispered. "Does it matter? We're expanding every month, placing our success stories in communities across the country. Imagine a world where everyone is as pleasant and cooperative as our patients. No more conflict, no more suffering, no more chaos." I thought about Margaret's empty background, Thomas's repetitive conversations, Sarah's fabricated family. They weren't people anymore, they were templates, carefully designed to appear human while lacking everything that made humanity real. The other staff members? Graduated from the program months ago. They're quite effective at maintaining the facility's operations while we work with new subjects. My hands shook as the full scope of what I'd stumbled into became clear. This wasn't a hospital, it was a factory, manufacturing compliant human beings and releasing them into the world like some kind of benevolent plague. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Dr. Marsh's expression remained perfectly pleasant. "Because in a few hours, it won't matter what you know. You'll be just as happy and content as everyone else here. And eventually, you'll help us bring that same peace to others." I lunged toward the door, but my legs felt strangely heavy. Looking down, I saw a small dart protruding from my thigh. When had that happened? My vision began to blur as Dr. Marsh's voice grew distant. "Don't fight it," he said gently. "Tomorrow you'll wake up feeling better than you ever have before. All your worries and fears will be gone." As consciousness faded, my last coherent thought was about the patients I'd grown to like over these past months. Somewhere beneath their perfect facades, were fragments of their original selves trapped and screaming. Or had those people been completely erased, leaving only these hollow echoes behind? The darkness was surprisingly warm and welcoming. I woke up this morning feeling absolutely wonderful. Dr. Marsh stopped by during rounds to check on my adjustment, and I thanked him for the excellent care I've been receiving. I'm not entirely sure why I was so anxious before. This place truly is remarkable. I've been thinking about applying for a position here permanently. The staff is so friendly, and the patients are delightful to work with. Everyone here is sane, happy, and perfectly healthy. I can't imagine wanting to be anywhere else.